Document. Part 1. Jason Cole was not the kind of man who got easily surprised. He had spent most of his adult life floating through the vast emptiness of space, staring at stars that burned brighter than anything on Earth. As an astronaut aboard the celestial Voyager, he had seen wonders and horrors alike, meteor showers that lit up the void like fireworks, alien planets with skies painted in colors no human could name, and the lonely silence of deep space that sometimes made him wonder if he'd ever see home again. But none of those experiences prepared him for what he found that day. It started as a routine check. The cargo bay of the celestial Voyager wasn't exactly glamorous. It was cluttered with spare parts, tools and supplies stacked high enough to make navigation tricky. Jason's job was simple: inspect the storage crates to ensure nothing had shifted during their recent jump through hyperspace. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. Space travel wasn't all heroics and adventure. Most days were filled with mundane tasks like this one. As Jason moved between the rows of containers, flashlight in hand, something caught his eye. Tucked away behind a stack of emergency rations was a small metallic box he didn't recognize. At first he thought it might belong to Alex Reed, the ship's engineer, or perhaps Emily Carter, the biologist who always seemed to have some new experiment tucked under her arm. But when he leaned closer, he realized there were no labels on the container, no serial numbers, no markings of any kind. Looked almost abandoned. Curiosity tugged at him. Most people would have left it alone, reported it to command, and gone about their business. But Jason had always been the curious type. The curiosity had gotten him into trouble more times than he cared to admit, but it had also saved his life. Once or twice. So instead of walking away, he knelt down and pried the lid open. What he saw inside stopped him cold. The box contained a strange, gelatinous substance that shimmered faintly in the dim light of his flashlight. It wasn't solid, but it wasn't liquid either. It seemed to exist somewhere in between, shifting and pulsating like a living thing. Tiny veins of greenish light ran through it, branching out like roots in soft soil. For a moment, Jason wondered if he was hallucinating. Maybe the isolation of space was finally getting to him. But then the substance moved, not just quivered, like jelly might, but actually shifted its shape, stretching toward the edge of the container as though it sensed his presence. Jason froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He told himself it was impossible, that things didn't just move on their own. But the evidence was right in front of him. Whatever this was, it was alive. Okay, Jason muttered to himself, trying to sound calm, even though his voice trembled slightly. You're overreacting. This is probably just some weird alien mold or something. He reached out cautiously, half expecting the substance to leap out and attack him. Instead, it reacted to his touch, flattening itself against the side of the container where his fingers hovered. The movement was deliberate, almost intelligent. Jason pulled his hand back quickly, feeling a chill run down his spine. Intelligent. Organisms weren't unheard of in space exploration, but they usually came in recognizable forms, creatures with eyes, limbs, voices. This was different. Didn't look like anything he'd ever encountered before. For a long moment, Jason debated what to do next. Protocol dictated that he should seal the container immediately and report his findings to Captain Laura Hayes, the mission leader. But part of him hesitated. There was something mesmerizing about the glowing mass, something that made him want to keep watching it, studying it. He couldn't explain why, but he felt drawn to it, as though it were calling out to him in a language he couldn't quite understand. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jason closed the lid and stood up. His mind raced with questions. Where had this thing come from? How had it ended up on their ship? Most importantly, what was it capable of? He knew he couldn't answer those questions alone. He needed help. But as he turned to leave the cargo bay, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just stumbled onto something far bigger than he could comprehend. Little did Jason know, his discovery would change everything, for better or worse. By the time he reached the lab, Jason's thoughts were spinning faster than the engines of the celestial Voyager. He found Emily Carter bent over a microscope, her blonde hair tied back in a messy bun. She looked up as he entered, her sharp blue eyes narrowing slightly in. Curiosity, What's got you so worked up? She asked, setting aside her notes. Emily had a way of cutting straight to the point, which Jason both admired and occasionally found irritating. I need your opinion on something, he said, placing the container carefully on the table. I found this in the cargo bay. Emily raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything as she opened the lid. Her expression changed instantly, shifting from skepticism to fascination. She leaned in closer, her face illuminated by the faint green glow emanating from within. Well, she said slowly, her voice tinged with awe, this is unusual. That's one word for it, Jason replied dryly. Any idea what it is? Emily shook her head, her gaze still fixed on the mysterious substance. Not yet, but whatever it is, it's definitely alive.
Nice.
Look at how it reacts to stimuli. She tapped the side of the container lightly with her pen. The organism responded by flowing smoothly toward the source of the vibration. It didn't recoil or retreat, it moved with purpose, almost as if it were investigating them. This is incredible, Emily murmured, her tone hushed with excitement. We've never seen anything like this before. It's completely unlike any known life form. Jason crossed his arms, frowning. Yeah, well, incredible isn't exactly the word I'd use. More like terrifying. Have you considered the possibility that it might be dangerous? Emily waved a dismissive hand. Dangerous? Don't be ridiculous. We don't even know what it is yet. For all we know, it could be harmless. Or it could be the deadliest thing we've ever brought onto this ship, Jason countered. We can't just assume it's safe because it looks pretty. Emily rolled her eyes but didn't argue further. Instead, she began gathering equipment to analyze the organism more thoroughly. Jason watched her work for a few minutes, torn between admiration for her enthusiasm and frustration at her recklessness. He trusted Emily's expertise, but her tendency to dive headfirst into unknown situations without fully considering the risks worried him. Before he could voice his concerns further, Alex Reed appeared in the doorway. The engineer was tall and wiry, with dark circles under his eyes that hinted at too many late nights spent tinkering with the ship's systems. Unlike Emily, who thrived on discovery, Alex preferred order and predictability, a trait that often put him at odds with the rest of the crew. What's going on here? Alex asked, his tone wary. His eyes fell on the glowing container, and his expression darkened. Please tell me that's not what I think it is. It's just a sample we found in the cargo bay, Emily explained, barely glancing up from her instruments. Nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about? Alex repeated incredulously. That thing looks like it crawled out of a nightmare. Why is it even on the ship? We don't know how it got here, Jason admitted, but Emily thinks it's worth studying. Alex groaned, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Of course she does. Listen, I'm all for science and exploration, but some things are better left alone. Did it occur to either of you that this could be a biohazard? Or worse, some kind of alien weapon? Emily shot him an exasperated look. Oh, come on, Alex. Not everything is a conspiracy theory. If we destroy every unknown organism we encounter, we'll never learn anything. If we don't exercise caution, we might end up dead. Alex shot back. Call me crazy, but I'd rather err on the side of survival. Jason sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Arguments like this were common among the crew, especially when it came to decisions involving risk versus reward. On one hand, he understood Alex's concerns. The safety of the mission depended on making smart choices. On the other hand, he couldn't deny the potential value of Emily's research. Discoveries like this didn't come along every day. Look, he said finally, stepping between them. Let's take a step back and think this through. Emily, can you give us a rough estimate of how long it will take to analyze this thing? A few hours, maybe less, Emily replied confidently. Once I get a better understanding of its composition, I can determine whether it poses any real threat. And if it does, Alex pressed. Then we'll deal with it, Jason said firmly, but until we know more, let's keep our heads and focus on the facts. Agreed? Both Emily and Alex nodded reluctantly, though neither looked entirely satisfied. Jason knew he hadn't resolved the issue completely, but it was enough to buy them some time. For now, They would proceed cautiously, balancing curiosity with caution. As the three of them returned their attention to the glowing organism, none of them noticed the subtle shift in its behavior. The veins of light pulsed faintly, almost imperceptibly, as though it were listening to their conversation. And deep within its translucent form, something stirred a spark of awareness, growing stronger with each passing moment. Whatever Jason had discovered in the cargo bay, it was only the beginning. Document. Part 2, the lab on the Celestial Voyager, was small, but functional. Filled with equipment that hummed softly as it processed data, Emily Carter worked quickly, her hands moving with practiced precision as she set up a series of tests to analyze the mysterious organism. Jason Cole stood nearby, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, watching her every move. Alex Reed lingered in the doorway, his face still etched with unease. "You're sure this is safe?" Alex asked for the third time, his voice tinged with irritation because it doesn't look safe. Emily sighed, glancing up from her work. "Alex, I told you already. We won't know anything until we run these tests. If you're so worried, why don't you go check the engine room or something? Make yourself useful." "I'm just saying," Alex muttered, ignoring her jab. "If this thing turns out to be dangerous, we're going to have a big problem. And by we, I mean all of us." Jason stepped in before the argument could escalate further. "Let's focus, okay? Emily, what exactly are you testing for?" Emily adjusted the settings on one of the machines and turned to face him. "First, I'm analyzing its chemical composition. Then I'll see if it reacts to external stimuli, light, sound, temperature changes. After that, I'll try to determine whether it has any kind of biological structure we can identify." "Biological structure?" Jason repeated, frowning. "You think it might be alive in the traditional sense?" "It's definitely alive," Emily said firmly. "But not necessarily in a way we understand. This thing doesn't fit into any known category. That's what makes it so fascinating." Jason didn't respond right away. He glanced at the glowing mass inside the container, which seemed to pulse faintly in rhythm with the ship's low-frequency hum. There was something unsettling about it, something he couldn't quite put into words. It wasn't just the way it moved or reacted, it was the feeling that it was aware of them, studying them just as much as they were studying it. As Emily continued her work, the atmosphere in the lab grew tense. Alex paced back and forth, occasionally stopping to peer over her shoulder at the screens displaying streams of data. Jason stayed where he was, his eyes fixed on the organism. Every now and then it would shift slightly, almost imperceptibly, as though responding to their presence. Finally, after what felt like hours, Emily straightened up and let out a breath. "Okay, here's what I've got so far." Both Jason and Alex turned to her expectantly. She tapped a few keys on her computer, pulling up a series of graphs and charts. "Chemically speaking, this thing is unlike anything I've ever seen," she began. "It's made up of compounds that don't exist naturally, or at least not on Earth. Some of the elements match descriptions of materials found on other planets, but others, well, they're completely unknown." "What does that mean?" Jason asked. "It means this isn't native to our solar system," Emily replied. "And whoever or whatever created it had access to technology far beyond ours." Alex groaned, shaking his head. "Great. So we've got some alien superorganism loose on the ship. Fantastic." Emily snapped. "It's contained for now. But listen to this. The compound appears to be highly adaptive. When exposed to different stimuli, it changes its molecular structure almost instantly. It's like it can learn and evolve in real time." Jason frowned. "Learn? You mean like artificial intelligence?" "No," Emily said slowly. "Not artificial, organic. This thing isn't mechanical, it's alive. But it's intelligent in a way that's hard to define. It's reacting to its environment, adapting to survive." Alex threw up his hands in frustration. "That's even worse. An intelligent alien organism. On our ship? What happens when it decides it doesn't want to stay in that box anymore?" Emily rolled her eyes. "Relax, Alex. It's not going anywhere. It's not unless someone opens the container, which no one is going to do, right?" Jason nodded, though. His expression remained troubled. "For now, we keep it sealed. But we need to figure out what it is and where it came from." If it's dangerous, we can't afford to ignore it. Emily agreed, though reluctantly. Fine, but let me finish. My analysis first. I need more time to understand how it works. Before anyone could respond, the lights in the lab flickered briefly, causing all three of them to glance toward the ceiling. The ship's systems were generally reliable, but occasional glitches weren't uncommon, still given the circumstances. The timing felt ominous. Probably just a power fluctuation. Alex muttered, though his tone suggested he didn't believe his own words. Jason pushed off the wall and walked closer to the container. The organism seemed to glow brighter now, its veins of light pulsing steadily. He couldn't shake the feeling that it was responding to their conversation, as though it understood what they were saying. Does it react to sound? He asked suddenly, turning to Emily. She hesitated, then nodded. Yes, actually. Earlier. When I tapped the container, it responded immediately. Why? Jason gestured toward the organism. It feels like it's listening to us, like it knows we're talking about it. Emily frowned, stepping closer to the container. She reached out tentatively, tapping the glass again. Sure enough, the organism shifted, flowing smoothly toward the point of contact. Its movements were deliberate, almost curious. Interesting, she murmured. It's definitely interacting with us, but I don't think it's hostile. That's a big assumption, Alex said sharply. Just because it hasn't attacked us yet doesn't mean it won't. Emily ignored him, her attention fully focused on the organism. Jason, hand me that microphone. I want to test its response to sound waves. Jason handed her the device, watching warily as she positioned it near the container. She activated the microphone and spoke a single word. Hello. The reaction was immediate. The organism surged forward, pressing itself against the glass, as though trying to get closer. Its glow intensified, and the pulsing veins of light began to flash erratically. Well, Emily said, her voice tinged with awe. That answers one question. It responds to human speech, but what does it mean? Jason asked, his brow furrowing. Is it communicating with us? Maybe, Emily admitted. Or maybe it's just mimicking what it hears. Either way, this is groundbreaking. He never encountered an organism capable of such complex behavior. Alex groaned loudly, throwing his hands in the air. Are you hearing yourselves? This thing is clearly unnatural and probably dangerous, and you're treating it like some kind of science experiment. And what would you suggest we do instead? Emily shot back. That's reckless, Alex. We owe it to humanity to study this. We owe it to humanity to survive, Alex countered. This thing gets loose, it could wipe us all out. The argument escalated quickly, with both Emily and Alex raising their voices in frustration. Jason stepped between them, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace. Enough, he barked, silencing them both. Arguing isn't helping. Look, I agree with Alex that we need to be careful, but I also trust Emily's judgment. Let's give her a little more time to figure this out. In the meantime, we'll take precautions. No unnecessary risks, okay? Both Emily and Alex nodded reluctantly, though neither looked happy about the compromise. Jason turned back to the container, his gaze lingering on the glowing mass within. Whatever this thing is, he said quietly, it's smarter than we thought, and that makes it even more important that we handle it carefully. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. Emily continued her experiments, documenting every detail of the organism's behavior. Jason assisted her whenever possible, while Alex kept a close eye on the ship's systems, monitoring for any signs of trouble. Despite their efforts to remain calm, the tension among the crew was palpable. Late that evening, as the others prepared to leave the lab, Emily hesitated. She glanced at the container one last time, her curiosity outweighing her exhaustion. One more test, she whispered to herself, picking up a small device designed to emit low-frequency vibrations. She activated it, aiming the signal at the organism. At first, nothing happened, and slowly the glowing mass began to ripple, its surface undulating like water disturbed by a breeze. The veins of light pulsed rapidly, forming patterns that seemed almost deliberate. Emily leaned closer, her eyes wide with fascination. This is incredible, but then something unexpected occurred. The organism stretched outward, pressing itself flat against the sides of the container. For a moment it seemed to pause, as though gathering strength. Then, with startling speed, it surged upward, slamming into the lid of the container with enough force to make the entire structure rattle. Startled, Lee stumbled backward, nearly dropping the device. The vibration stopped abruptly, and the organism retreated, settling back into its original shape. Its glow dimmed slightly as though it were resting. Breathing heavily, Emily stared at the container, her mind racing. Whatever this thing was, it was far more powerful than she had anticipated. And if it could exert that kind of force while confined, she shuddered to think what it might be capable of if it escaped. For the first time since discovering the organism, Emily felt a flicker of doubt. Was she wrong to keep studying it? Could Alex have been right all along? She didn't have answers, not yet. But one thing was certain. They were playing with fire, and sooner or later, someone was bound to get burned. Document. Part 3. The next morning on the Celestial Voyager began quietly, but the calm was deceptive. The crew gathered in the ship's common area for breakfast, a small, cramped space with foldable tables and chairs bolted to the floor. The hum of the engines provided a constant background noise, blending with the soft clinking of utensils against metal trays. Despite the routine setting, the atmosphere was tense. Jason Cole sat at one end of the table, picking at his food without much appetite. His mind kept drifting back to the organism in the lab. He couldn't shake the memory of how it had reacted to Emily's test the night before. The way it had surged against the lid of its container, as if testing its limits. It wasn't just intelligent, it seemed determined, almost willful. Jason didn't like the implications. Across from him, Emily Carter looked exhausted but exhilarated. She had spent most of the night running additional tests, documenting every detail she could observe about the organism. Her notes were scattered across the table, filled with diagrams and scribbled observations. She sipped her coffee eagerly, her eyes bright with excitement. "It's amazing," she said, breaking the silence. "I've never seen anything like it. Its ability to adapt is beyond anything we've encountered before." Alex Reed, seated beside Jason, gave her a skeptical look. "You mean dangerous, right? Because that's what I'm hearing?" Emily sighed, clearly frustrated by his negativity. "Dangerous implies intent, Alex. We don't know if this thing has any kind of motive. All we know is that it reacts to stimuli and adapts accordingly." "Exactly," Alex shot back. "It learns. And if it learns fast enough, who's to say it won't figure out how to escape?" Jason intervened before the argument could escalate. "Let's focus on facts for now. Emily, what did you find last night?" Emily pushed her tray aside and spread out her notes. "When I exposed it to low-frequency vibrations, it responded aggressively. It pressed itself against the lid of the container, applying significant force. That tells me two things. First, it's capable of exerting physical strength when provoked. Second, it might perceive certain sounds or frequencies as threats. Or opportunities," Alex muttered under his breath. Ignoring him, Emily continued. "But here's the really interesting part. After it calmed down, it started mimicking the patterns of the vibrations. Not perfectly, but close enough to suggest. It was trying to replicate them. It's not just reacting, it's learning." Jason frowned, leaning forward. "Learning how to do what? Communicate? Defend itself?" "Both," Emily replied. "Maybe more. I think it's studying us as much as we're studying it." "That's comforting," Alex said sarcastically. "So what you're saying is, we've got an alien organism that can learn, adapt, and potentially break out of its container. Great. What's the plan?" "The plan," Emily said firmly, "is to keep studying it. If we understand how it works, we can predict its behavior and take precautions. And if we can't," Alex asked pointedly, "what happens if it gets loose?" Jason held up a hand to stop the argument. "Enough for now. We proceed carefully. Emily, you keep analyzing it, but we'll double the security around the lab. Alex, make sure the ship's systems are stable. We don't need any malfunctions while we're dealing with this." Alex nodded reluctantly, though his expression remained grim. "Fine, but I'm keeping an eye on that thing. If so much as twitches wrong, I'm shutting it down." "You mean destroying it?" Emily corrected sharply. "And that's not happening," unless absolutely necessary. Jason stood up, signaling the end of the discussion. We all have jobs to do. Let's get to work. Later that day, Emily returned to the lab, her determination renewed. She set up a new series of experiments, focusing on the organism's ability to mimic. Using a small speaker, she played recorded sounds, human voices, mechanical noises, even snippets of music, and observed how the organism reacted. Each time, it pulsed and shifted, its glowing veins forming patterns that seemed to echo the input. As the hours passed, Emily grew more confident in her assessment. The organism wasn't just responding randomly, it was processing information. And attempting to replicate it? The implications were staggering. If it could learn to mimic sound, what else might it be capable of? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden noise, a faint scraping sound coming from somewhere nearby. She paused, glancing around the lab. The ship's systems were quiet, and the only other person on board should have been Alex, who was supposed to be in the engine room. "Hello?" she called out hesitantly. "Is someone there?" There was no response, but the scraping sound continued, growing louder. Emily's heart began to race. She turned off the speaker and moved cautiously toward the source of the noise, which seemed to be coming from the far corner of the lab. That's when she saw it. The container holding the organism was vibrating slightly, its metallic surface marked with tiny scratches. Inside, the glowing mass churned restlessly, pressing itself against the walls with increasing intensity. Emily stared in disbelief as the scratches deepened, as though the organism were trying to claw its way out. "No," she whispered, stepping closer. "This isn't possible." Before she could react further, the organism surged violently, slamming into the lid of the container with enough force to send it toppling over. The container hit the floor with a loud clang, and the lid popped, opened slightly. A sliver of green light spilled out, illuminating the surrounding area. Emily froze, her mind racing. She knew she should seal it immediately, but curiosity held her in place. Slowly, tentatively, she knelt down to examine the crack in the lid. The organism didn't wait. With startling speed, it oozed out of the opening, spilling onto the floor in a glowing gelatinous stream. Emily scrambled backward, her heart pounding as it began to spread across the lab, flowing smoothly over tools and equipment. "What are you doing?" she murmured, half to herself, half to the organism. "Stop." But it didn't stop. Instead, it split into smaller tendrils, each moving independently yet somehow coordinated. One tendril reached out toward a nearby microscope, wrapping around it and absorbing its shape. Another flowed over a stack of papers, leaving behind a faint luminescent residue. Emily grabbed her communicator, her hands trembling. "Jason, Alex, you need to get to the lab now." Her voice echoed through the ship's intercom system, and within moments, both men arrived, their expressions shifting from confusion to alarm as they took in the scene. The lab was bathed in an eerie green glow. The organism was everywhere, crawling along the walls, pooling on the floor, and even creeping up the legs of the lab table. "What the hell happened?" Alex demanded, his voice rising in panic. "Don't know," Emily cried. "It broke free." "I tried to contain it, but it's too strong." Jason stepped forward, his face pale but resolute. "We need to shut it down." "Now?" Alex asked. "Short of blowing up the ship, I don't see an easy way to stop this thing." Emily shook her head frantically. "No, we can't destroy it. We don't understand it yet. And we may never get the chance if it spreads," Jason snapped. "Emily, this isn't up for debate. We secure the lab, seal it off, and figure out our next move." The organism seemed to sense their distress. Its tendrils retracted slightly, coalescing into a single mass that hovered near the center of the room. For a moment, it simply pulsed, its glow dimming and brightening rhythmically. Then, without warning, it surged forward, splitting into multiple shapes that bore an uncanny resemblance to the crew members themselves. Jason, Alex, and Emily watched in stunned horror as the glowing replicas formed. Each one mimicked their posture and movements with eerie accuracy down to the smallest details. The replica of Jason tilted its head as though studying them. The replica of Alex raised a translucent hand, mirroring his defensive stance. The replica of Emily smiled faintly, its features soft and inviting. "This is impossible," Emily whispered, tears welling in her eyes. It's copying us." Jason stepped protectively in front of her, his voice steady despite the fear, coursing through him. "Everyone stay calm. Whatever this thing is, it's learning. Fast. But what does it want?" Alex asked, his voice shaking. "What's it going to do next?" No one had an answer. The organism, or rather, the glowing replicas, remained, still watching them with an unsettling intensity. It was clear that they were dealing with something far beyond their understanding, something that could either be humanity's greatest discovery or its deadliest threat. For now, all they could do was wait and hope they hadn't already made a fatal mistake. Document Part 4. The lab was silent except for the faint hum of the ship's systems and the soft glow emanating from the replicas of Jason, Alex, and Emily. The crew stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. Each glowing figure mimicked their movements with unsettling precision, as though they were staring into distorted mirrors. The air felt heavy, charged with an unspoken tension that made it hard to breathe. Jason broke the silence first, his voice low but firm. "We need to move, now." Alex glanced at him sharply. "Move where? It's already copied us. What's stopping it from doing whatever it wants?" Emily stepped forward hesitantly, her eyes locked on the replica of herself. "It hasn't attacked us," she said softly. "If it wanted to hurt us, it could have done so by now." "That doesn't mean it won't," Alex countered, his tone sharp. "This thing is unpredictable. Can't trust it." Jason nodded in agreement. "He's right, but panicking won't help. Let's focus on containing it before it spreads beyond the lab." The organism, or rather, its replicas, remained motionless, watching them intently. The copy of Jason tilted its head slightly, as if curious about their conversation. Emily couldn't help but notice how eerily lifelike it was.
"I'll lead the weights."
Glowing form shifted subtly, almost like breathing. It wasn't just copying their appearances, it was imitating their mannerisms too. "We need to seal this room," Jason continued, glancing around for anything they could use to block the exits. "If it gets into the rest of the ship, we're finished." "Easier said than done," Alex muttered. "Look at it's already everywhere." "How are we supposed to stop something that can split itself apart and crawl through cracks?" Emily's mind raced as she tried to think of a solution. "Maybe we can trap it. If we isolate the replicas individually, we might be able to contain them." "And then what?" Alex asked. "Keep them locked up forever." "This isn't some pet project, Emily. It's dangerous. I know that." Emily snapped, her frustration boiling over. "But destroying it would be a mistake." "Think about what?" "We could learn. If we can figure out how it works, we might even find a way to control it." Jason stepped between them, raising his hands in a calming gesture. "Enough. Fighting isn't going to solve this. Here's what we'll do, Alex. Go check the supply closet for anything we can use to reinforce the doors. Emily, see if you can lure the replicas into one area so we can trap them. I'll stay here and keep an eye on things." Both Alex and Emily hesitated, but neither argued. They knew time was running out, the final glance at the glowing figures. Alex hurried out of the lab, leaving Jason and Emily alone with the replicas. As soon as he was gone, Emily turned to Jason, her voice trembling. "Do you really think we can stop it?" Jason met her gaze, his expression grim but resolute. "I don't know, but we have to try." In the hallway outside the lab, Alex moved quickly, his footsteps echoing against the metal walls. He hated being separated from the others, especially with that thing loose in the ship. Every creak and groan of the celestial voyager set his nerves on edge. He half expected one of those glowing replicas to appear behind him at any moment. Reaching the supply closet, Alex yanked open the door and began rummaging through shelves stacked with tools, spare parts, and emergency kits. His hands shook as he grabbed rolls of duct tape, lengths of rope, and sheets of reinforced plastic. Anything that could help seal off the lab. As he worked, a thought crossed his mind, a chilling realization that made his blood run cold. What if the organism had already spread beyond the lab? What if it was watching him right now, waiting for the perfect moment to strike? He spun around suddenly, scanning the corridor, but saw nothing but empty space. Get a grip, he muttered to himself, forcing his breathing to steady. You're letting your imagination get the better of you. Still, the feeling lingered, gnawing at the edges of his thoughts. He stuffed the supplies into a duffel bag and headed back toward the lab, moving faster than before. The sooner they sealed the room, the safer they'd all be. Back in the lab, Emily was trying to coax the replicas into a corner. She waved her arms slowly, making deliberate movements to draw their attention. To her relief, the glowing figures followed her lead, drifting closer like curious animals. Their forms shimmered and pulsed, casting eerie shadows across the walls. It's working, she whispered to Jason, who stood nearby with a fire extinguisher in hand, ready to defend them if necessary. They're responding to me. Good. Jason replied, keep going, we need to get them all together. Emily nodded and continued guiding the replicas toward the far corner of the room. As she did, she noticed something strange. The copies weren't just mimicking her actions anymore. They were starting to anticipate them, moving slightly ahead of her gestures, as though predicting her next move. Her heart skipped a beat. Jason, she said quietly, her voice tinged with alarm. They're learning again. Jason frowned, stepping closer. What do you mean? They're not just copying me, they're adapting. Look, she raised her arms slowly. The replica of herself mirrored the motion, but then it extended its glowing limb further, reaching out toward her. The other replicas did the same, their forms stretching unnaturally as they closed the distance between them. Jason tightened his grip on the fire extinguisher. Back away, Emily, slowly. Lee. She obeyed, retreating step by step as the replicas advanced. Their movements were fluid and deliberate, almost hypnotic. For a moment, Emily felt trapped in a nightmare, unable to look away as the glowing figures loomed closer. Just then, Alex burst into the room, carrying the duffel bag of supplies. I've got the stuff, he announced, only to freeze when he saw the scene unfolding before him. What the hell is happening? The replicas are evolving, Jason said tersely. They're not just mimicking us anymore, they're acting independently. Alex dropped the bag and rushed to help, grabbing a length of rope and positioning himself near the door. We need to act fast. Once they spread out, we'll lose control. Together, the three of them worked frantically to herd the replicas into the corner. Emily used her movements to distract them, while Jason and Alex constructed makeshift barriers using the supplies Alex had brought. The glowing figures resisted at first, pulsing brighter and spreading their tendrils in an attempt to escape, but eventually they were forced into a tight cluster, surrounded by layers of reinforced plastic and duct tape. There, Jason said, wiping sweat from his brow as he secured the last piece of tape. That should hold them for now. Emily let out a shaky breath, leaning against the wall for support. Oh. Do you think it'll work? It has to, Alex replied grimly, because if it doesn't, we're dead. For a few moments, the crew simply stood there, catching their breath and watching the trapped replicas. The glowing mass writhed behind the barriers, straining against the makeshift containment. Its veins of light pulsed erratically, as though it were angry, or perhaps frustrated. What do we do now? Emily asked, breaking the silence. Jason crossed his arms, his expression thoughtful. We need to figure out its weaknesses. There has to be something that limits its abilities. And how exactly do we do that? Alex demanded. Not like we can just ask it. Emily hesitated, then spoke up. Maybe we can. Think about it to responds to stimuli, learns from its environment, and mimics behavior. What if it's capable of understanding more than we realize? Jason raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting we talk to it? Why not? Emily said. We've seen how it reacts to sound and movement. If we approach it carefully, maybe we can communicate, Alex groaned. Are you serious? You want to negotiate with an alien blob that just tried to take over the lab? It's worth a shot, Jason said, surprising both of them. You don't have many options left. Emily nodded, stepping closer to the barrier. Okay, here goes nothing. She took a deep breath and addressed the glowing mass. We're not your enemies. We don't want to hurt you. Can you understand me?" For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the organism's pulsing slowed, its glow dimming slightly. One of the replicas, the one resembling Emily, shifted forward, pressing itself gently against the barrier. "I think it's listening," Emily murmured, her voice filled with awe. Jason exchanged a glance with Alex, who looked skeptical but didn't argue. Whatever this thing was, it was smarter than they had anticipated, and possibly more dangerous. But for now, it seemed willing to listen. Whether that would last remained to be seen. Document. Part 5. The glowing replica of Emily pressed itself gently against the barrier, its movements slow and deliberate. The rest of the organism remained still, its pulsing glow dimmed to a faint shimmer. For a moment, the lab was eerily quiet, the tension hanging thick in the air like fog. Jason watched the scene carefully, his hand resting on the fire extinguisher as a precaution. "Emily," he said quietly, "what are you doing?" "I'm trying to see if it understands." "Us," she replied, her voice steady despite the uncertainty in her eyes. "It reacted when I spoke earlier. Maybe we can establish some kind of communication." Alex groaned, pacing back and forth near the door. "This is insane. You're talking to a blob that broke out of its container and copied our faces. Makes you think it's going to play nice?" "Don't know that it won't," Emily shot back, her tone sharp but controlled. "If it wanted to attack us, it could have already. But instead, it's responding calmly. That has to mean something." Jason stepped closer to the barrier, his gaze fixed on the glowing mass. "Even if it does understand us, how do we know it's telling the truth? It could be luring us into a false sense of security." Emily didn't answer right away. Turned her attention back to the replica, her expression softening slightly. "Can you show me what you want?" she asked slowly. "Are you trying to tell us something?" The organism pulsed once, a single rhythmic flash of light that seemed almost deliberate. Then the replica resembling Emily began to shift, its form rippling like water disturbed by a breeze. Slowly it stretched outward, flattening itself against the barrier until it formed a crude shape, a circle, with smaller lines branching off from it. "What is that supposed to be?" Alex muttered, frowning. "A diagram? A map, it looks like?" "Star," Jason said thoughtfully. "Or maybe a solar system." Emily nodded, her eyes wide with excitement. "That's exactly what it is. It's showing us where it came from. Look, the larger circle must represent a sun, and those smaller lines are planets orbiting around it." Jason crossed his arms, his skepticism evident. "So it's giving us directions? Why would it do that?" "Maybe because it wants to go home," Emily suggested. "Maybe it's trying to communicate its origin to gain our trust."
Alex
snorted. "Great. So now, we're playing cosmic tour guides for an alien blob. This keeps getting better." Ignoring him, Emily leaned closer to the barrier. "Is this your home?" she asked, pointing at the glowing image. "Would you want to go back there?" The organism pulsed again, this time more brightly, as though confirming her question. Its glow intensified, and the replicas surrounding it began to merge together, forming a single, cohesive mass once more. The glowing figure of Emily dissolved into the larger entity, leaving only the pulsating core behind. Jason glanced at Emily, his expression cautious. "Okay, so it showed us where it came from. Does that mean it's harmless?" "No," Emily admitted. "But it means it's capable of reasoning, at least to some extent. If we can keep communicating with it, maybe we can find a way to coexist without risking the ship." Alex threw up his hands in frustration. "Coexist with that thing? Are you forgetting that it escaped containment twice already? And let's not forget the fact that it can mimic us perfectly. How long before it figures out how to open doors or sabotage systems?" "He's got a point," Jason said reluctantly. "Can't afford to take chances. Even if it seems cooperative now, we don't know what it's capable of in the long run." Emily hesitated, torn between her curiosity and the safety of the crew. "I understand your concerns, but destroying a tour, even isolating it completely, might be a mistake. Think about what we could learn from it. This could be the most important discovery in human history." And what if it turns out to be the deadliest threat we've ever faced? Alex countered. What then? Before Emily could respond, the organism shifted again, drawing their attention. The glowing mass began to stretch upward, taking on a vaguely humanoid shape. Its features were indistinct, but the outline was unmistakably. Head, shoulders, arms, and legs stood silently facing them, as though waiting for their next move. Jason tightened his grip on the fire extinguisher, his muscles tense. What's it doing now? I think it's mimicking us again, Emily said softly. But this time, it's different. It's not just copying our appearances, it's standing like we are, as if it's trying to connect. Alex shook his head in disbelief. This is ridiculous. It's not connecting, it's manipulating us. We need to shut it down before it gets any smarter.
Ow.
Emily exclaimed, stepping protectively in front of the barrier. We can't destroy it. Not yet. We owe it a chance to prove itself. Jason sighed, running a hand through his hair. Fine, but we're not lowering our guard. If it makes one. Wrong move. We act immediately. Agreed. Emily nodded, though her expression was troubled. Alex muttered something under his breath, but didn't argue further. They all knew they were walking a fine line, balancing discovery with danger. Over the next hour, Emily continued her attempts to communicate with the organism. She used simple gestures and words, testing its ability to respond. The glowing mass reacted, mimicking her actions or forming shapes that seemed to convey meaning. At one point, it created a series of glowing dots in a straight line, which Emily interpreted as a timeline or sequence. It's incredible, she murmured, jotting notes furiously. It's not just intelligent, it's adaptive. Every interaction teaches it something new. Jason watched her work, his brow furrowed in thought. Do you think it knows we're studying it, like consciously? I think it's aware of us, Emily replied. Whether that awareness is conscious or instinctual, I'm not sure. But it's definitely learning from everything we do. The experiment progressed. Alex grew increasingly restless. He paced the edges of the lab, keeping a wary eye on the organism. This whole thing feels like a ticking time bomb, he muttered. Every second we spend talking to it gives it another opportunity to figure us out. Jason didn't disagree, but he also recognized the value of Emily's approach. For now, we proceed cautiously. If it starts acting aggressively, we'll reassess. Until then, let's focus on gathering information. Their efforts paid off when the organism displayed a new behavior. After Emily mimicked a wave, the glowing mass responded by creating a swirling pattern of light that resembled a spiral galaxy. It rotated slowly, its veins of greenish energy pulsing in rhythm. What does that mean? Jason asked, leaning closer. Emily hesitated, her mind racing. I think it's showing us its purpose, or maybe its origin story. The galaxy could represent where it came from, or perhaps what it serves. Serves? Alex repeated sharply. You mean like a master? Is this thing working for someone else? It's possible, Emily admitted. Some organisms operate in symbiosis with others. Maybe this one is part of a larger system. Jason frowned, glancing at the glowing mass. If that's true, we might not be dealing with just one organism. There could be more out there, maybe even bigger ones. The thought sent a chill. Through the room, none of them spoke for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. The implications were staggering. If the organism was part of a greater network, her discovery could have consequences far beyond the celestial voyager. Finally, Alex broke the silence. We need to make a decision. Either we study it indefinitely, hoping it doesn't turn on us, or we find a way to neutralize it before it becomes a problem. Jason nodded, his expression grim. And whatever we decide, we need to do it soon. Because the longer we wait, the more unpredictable it becomes. Emily looked at the organism, her heart heavy with conflicting emotions. She wanted desperately to believe that it was benign, that it posed no real threat. But deep down, she knew the risks. Whatever this thing was, it was unlike anything humanity had encountered before, and that made it both a miracle and a menace. For now, they had no choice but to keep moving forward, step by uncertain step, into the unknown. Document. Part 6. The decision to keep studying the organism weighed heavily on the crew. Each of them carried their doubts and fears, but they also knew there was no turning back. The glowing mass in the lab had already proven itself intelligent, adaptive, and capable of learning at an alarming rate. Emily Carter remained convinced that communication was the key to understanding it, while Alex Reed's skepticism bordered on outright hostility. Jason Cole found himself caught in the middle, torn between caution and curiosity. As the hours passed, the organism continued to evolve its behavior. It mimicked gestures with increasing accuracy, responded to verbal commands, and even began forming more complex shapes patterns that suggested a rudimentary form of expression. At one point, when Emily asked it to show her something new, the glowing mass split into smaller tendrils that wove together like threads, creating what looked like a three-dimensional lattice. The structure pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. Jason watched in silence, his arms crossed as he leaned against the wall. "What do you think it means?" he asked finally, breaking the quiet. Emily tilted her head, studying the pulsating lattice. "I'm not sure. It could be symbolic, a representation of how it connects or interacts with other things. Or maybe it's just experimenting, testing its own limits." Alex groaned from his position near the door where he'd been keeping watch. "This is getting us nowhere. All we're doing is feeding its ego, or whatever passes for an ego in a blob. We need to figure out how to contain it permanently before it figures out how to break free again. Can't just lock it up and forget about it," Emily argued, frustration creeping into her voice. "It's trying to communicate with us. Ignoring that would be a mistake. Letting it roam free would be suicide." Alex shot back. "Saw what happened last time? One wrong move and it'll spread through the entire ship." Jason stepped forward, raising a hand to stop the argument before it escalated. "Enough. Both of you have valid points, but arguing won't solve anything. For now, we focus on gathering information. If we understand how it operates, we'll have a better chance of controlling it." Emily nodded reluctantly, though her eyes still burned with determination. She turned back to the organism, speaking slowly and clearly. "Can you show me how you survive? What do you need to live?" The glowing mass pulsed once, then reshaped itself into a flat, circular form. In the center of the circle, several lines branched outward, resembling roots digging into soil. The image shifted slightly, and small bursts of light appeared along the lines, as if illustrating energy being absorbed. "I think it's showing us how it feeds," Emily said, excitement creeping into her tone. "It absorbs energy, maybe heat, radiation, or even electricity. That explains why it reacted so strongly to the vibrations and sound waves earlier." Jason frowned, stepping closer to examine the shape. "If it feeds on energy, does that mean it could drain the ship's systems? Our power reserves?" "It's possible," Emily admitted, "but only if it has direct access to those systems. Right now, it's contained within this barrier. As long as we keep it isolated, it shouldn't pose a threat." Alex snorted derisively. "That's a big if. This thing has already escaped once. How do we know it won't find another way out?" "Don't," Jason said bluntly. "Which is why we reinforce the containment measures. Alex, see if you can rig up some kind of monitoring system, something that alerts us if it tries to breach the barrier again." "On it," Alex replied, grabbing a toolkit from the corner of the lab. He disappeared into the hallway, muttering under his breath about alien blobs and stupid risks. Once Alex was gone, Jason turned to Emily, lowering his voice. "Do you really believe this thing is harmless?" Emily hesitated, her gaze lingering on the glowing mass. "I don't think it's inherently dangerous, not yet, anyway. But it's incredibly powerful, and it learns quickly. If we mishandle this, it could become a threat." Jason nodded grimly. "Then we tread carefully. Keep pushing for answers, but stay alert. If it shows any sign of aggression, we act immediately." Meanwhile, Alex worked feverishly in the engineering bay, assembling a makeshift alarm system using spare sensors and wiring. His hands moved with practiced precision, but his mind raced with worst-case scenarios. Every creak of the ship's metal walls made him glance over his shoulder, half expecting to see the organism oozing toward him by the time he returned to the lab. He had rigged a series of motion detectors and thermal scanners around the perimeter of the barrier. A small device attached to the wall emitted a steady green light, indicating that everything was secure for now. "There," Alex said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "If that thing so much as twitches in the wrong direction, we'll know." "About it," Emily gave him a grateful nod. "Thanks, Alex. I know you don't agree with this approach, but your help means a lot." Alex shrugged, avoiding her gaze. "I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it because I want to make sure we all get home alive." Jason clapped him on the shoulder. "We appreciate it. Now let's see if we can learn a little more." With the new safeguards in place, Emily resumed her experiments. She introduced various stimuli to test the organism's reactions: flashing lights, recorded sounds, and even mild electrical currents. Each time, the glowing mass adapted, absorbing the input and replicating it in its own unique way. When exposed to a low hum, it vibrated in sync with the frequency. When presented with a bright flash of light, it dimmed its glow momentarily, as if shielding itself. But then, something unexpected happened. During one test, Emily played a recording of human speech, a clip of Captain Laura Hayes giving a routine mission update. The organism reacted instantly, its glow intensifying as it formed a vague humanoid shape. A figure raised an arm, pointing directly at Emily. "What's it doing now?" Jason asked, stepping closer. "I think it recognizes the voice." "Emily," said, her voice tinged with awe. "Maybe it associates it with authority or leadership." The organism pulsed again, this time forming a question mark out of its glowing tendrils. The symbol hovered briefly before dissolving back into the main mass. "It's asking a question," Emily realized, her eyes widening. "It wants to know something." "What?" Jason pressed. "What does it want to know?" Before Emily could respond, the organism shifted again, creating a series of symbols that resembled Earth's continents. The shapes were crude but unmistakable. "It's showing us Earth," Emily whispered, her voice trembling. "It knows where we're from." Jason's jaw tightened. "How? Did someone mention Earth during our broadcasts?" "No," Emily said, shaking her head. "Not unless it picked up the information from us somehow. Maybe it can read our thoughts, or at least interpret our emotions." "That's impossible," Alex interjected sharply. "No organism can do that. Not without advanced technology." "Yet here we are," Jason said dryly, dealing with something that defies explanation. The organism pulsed again, drawing their attention. This time, it formed a single word in glowing letters. "Help." Emily froze, staring at the message. "It's asking for help." "For what?" Alex demanded. "Oh!" "To take over the ship? To destroy us?" "No," Emily said firmly. "I don't think so. Look at how it's behaving. It's cautious, almost. Desperate. Whatever it needs. It's important enough for it to try communicating with us." Jason exhaled sharply, rubbing the back of his neck. "Okay, let's assume it's telling the truth. What happens if we give it what it wants? Will it leave us alone? And go back to wherever it came from?" "I don't know," Emily admitted. "But refusing to help might make it hostile. And if it turns against us." She didn't finish the sentence. They all understood the stakes. If the organism decided to fight back, they wouldn't stand a chance. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The glowing mass remained still, its message hovering in the air like a plea. Finally, Jason broke the silence. "We help it," he said decisively. "But we do it on our terms. We find out exactly what it needs, and we make sure it doesn't put the ship or the crew in danger." Emily nodded, relief washing over her. "Thank you. I think this is the right call." Alex sighed, shaking his head. "I hope you're right, because if this goes sideways, we're all dead." With that, the three of them turned their attention back to the organism, determined to uncover its secrets and, perhaps, save themselves in the process. But deep down, each of them wondered whether they were making the smartest choice or the biggest mistake of their lives.